Hey everybody, how's it going? Andrew here, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of you for being such great listeners. And honestly, that sentiment is extended by our guest because they have graciously today shared a bunch of Steam keys with us to give to you. The only thing that we ask for is just to listen through to the end of the episode, and you can find out how you can go about obtaining some of these Steam keys. So again, not just coming from me for being such great listeners, but our guests as well, because this is a really important subject that they like to talk about. And as to show their gratitude for all of you for tuning in and listening, this is something that they want to give back in return. So again, thanks for being such awesome listeners, and let's get right to the show. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm the owner of Rigon Marketing and a games marketing consultant, and I'm going to be your host today. And we're going to be talking about facing challenges and creating opportunities for the game dev community. Now, the gaming industry is a global industry that continues to grow at a rapid rate, and being interconnected virtually is a main contributor to this. But despite being connected, there are still segregated areas and communities that face multiple challenges when creating a presence and establishing recognition in the industry. Thankfully, our guest today shares how to overcome these challenges, question limiting beliefs, and implement strategies that empower game dev communities and promote growth for the industry as a whole. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with us I have Marcelo Rigon. Marcelo, how's it going? And thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great. So much. I'm very thankful for you two inviting me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that all started because, we met at GDC and we were just talking and we were just like, wow, we're having lots of great conversations, and where else can we continue some of these discussions? And here we are. So awesome times. But before we get into it, I just want to give some, quick background to Marcelo here. He is the owner of Ilix Games. He is the game programmer and game designer. You also do a lot of things too with like market research, planning management, wearing lots of different hats, which is kind of something we can all relate to, right?
Yeah.
And then games include like Towers of Samsara, I Am Soul's Guides, Face It, Soul Gambler, and many others. Lots of cool games. And also you have like more than 300 educational games under your belt as well too. Super impressive and everything else. On top of that, you also have in terms of communities you're involved with on stuff, it's a IGDA Campinas chapter leader for, I'm trying to do the math real quick, but it looks
8 years.
8 years, so just under a decade. Awesome stuff. And what the director at SP, is it Yogos or? Jogos. And that's it's a Game Developer Studios Association in Sao Paulo. And you've been doing that for a few years now. So really involved with a lot of other things. But I think a really pinnacle note here is that you've basically had similar roles and everything with over like 20 years of experience, which very impressive and everything. And lots of other things too. I want to call out to some really interesting things though about you too, because these are really neat in terms of, you've been a game developer since 2003. I'm sorry. I graduated high school in 2002, so I don't want to make you sound old or anything like that. It's just really amazing and cool and stuff. But that's not the case too, because what was it? You started programming and learning game development because your father was, but basically you started this process since you were able to read. So that's not really aging you when I say I graduated in 2002, but what it is calling out to is that you've been doing this for a very long time and is probably part of the reason why you have so much experience, because you've been doing this. There's kids who might be started walking when you were actually programming, right? Like that's remarkable and awesome. Some other cool things, though. I mean, outside of being a game developer for so long, I mean, you have a bachelor's degree in physics and Freudian clinical psychoanalyst. Like, that's impressive. You know, and you also currently working on a master's degree in computer engineering on adapting psychoanalytical AI models to create better game agents. I mean, how top of mind is that, and important, especially because, man, AI, like learning how to make good AI is, as we all know, super important. And then when you have some downtime, in a way, you like to do random crafts like woodwork, bake, origami, gardening, all sorts of stuff, hiking, and you've also managed to become a master Tai Chi. Is it Chuan? Chuan and Ninja. So like, man, you're just all over the place in so many cool different areas. I can't begin to fathom how awesome all of this is, and such good stuff. Now, even though
the secret is don't sleep.
Don't sleep.
I'm kidding. Like I sleep a lot.
Everybody's like, what? It's so funny. All cool, interesting things. But you know what? Even though there was a lot here, I still want to dig in and find out a little bit more about you. So with that, folks, we're going to put Marcelo into the Q box round. Marcelo, are you ready?
Yeah.
Listen to him. He's like, yeah, whatever. I'm ready for anything at the rate I've been going. All right. First question. Why do you make games?
Well, like I always wanted to create words. So at first I was in tabletop games like D&D and GURPS and all of those systems. We didn't get the done structures. We created our stories. So we one day we looked at each other and said, "Oh, we're spending money buying books for RPG. Well, why don't we make our own?" And then I started making games like that.
Nice. What's your biggest gaming pet peeve?
I'm not sure. Like
the thing that annoys you the most when you're playing games, or that you see in games.
I hate PvP. Like I'm really, and most of the games go that way. Like games I love, like Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls, but I hate PvP. So I try to get offline and to play that.
Okay, fair enough. And last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Valley of the Stars. It's my current addiction.
Good one. Awesome. Well, Marcelo, thank you so much for sharing a little bit more insight to yourself, in addition to all the awesome other things that we learned about you today. But with that said, we definitely want to get into our topic today, which is, facing challenges and creating opportunities for the game dev community. So I want to kick off this conversation with, saying that it's, currently, we all know, and for the most part, it's easy to say that the game industry as a whole is a global one, and there's lots of reasons for that. But how would you disagree with this from a micro level?
Yeah, like we are all like connected, like in some extent, but people, they have a very different place where they start from or where they live in. So for instance, when I came to GDC the first time, it was 2014. And for me, it was like amazing to see people I admire that make great games, like walking in front of me. Like I would never have these people looking close to me when I am in Brazil, especially because I'm from the far west of Brazil. Mm-hmm. So like I would never see like Tim Schafer or John Romero or any of these guys, never on my life. It was like a myth. So we are connected. It's global, but not really. So I think that for some people, like when you are playing a game, you don't see that as like a legend or something like far away from you. And when you are in the development countries or more in the countryside, it's a very different world. Although you can like watch tutorials on YouTube, you can download the same tools, you can enter in Discord, but somehow the reality are different for everyone.
Yeah, because I mean, you're right. It really does put things into a different perspective where, hey, there is this environment that exists that connects us all together, being a global industry. But then there's also that, let's say, more tangible side of things where it can completely disrupt that view a little bit, especially for those that, let's say, that are on the outside or are in these isolated locations and things along that way. And it can, at that micro level, it can really make things a challenge. And it's not just for developers. I would say it's the gaming industry as a whole, for players and everything else like that. So it's interesting to look at these things. And I know we're going to dive into this a little bit more because there are some interesting perspectives that we don't necessarily consider about this. We're just like, oh, well, yeah, that's part of it. Of course it is. I mean, we can't all live in cities and such like that. But I think there's a lot more to it that we don't necessarily think. So that's a great segue, I think, in terms of talking and looking more in terms of industry challenges as it relates to this. So, knowing that, like, what kind of challenges do you feel prevent further growth for the game industry as a whole, especially for those in segregated areas that we kind of just alluded to?
Yeah, one of the problems I see that make that division greater is like in Brazil. When you are in Brazil, everyone, like most of our games are not sold for Brazilians. They are sold for people in my games, and I have games that talk directly about the religions in Brazil, like Umbanda. And even on those games, Brazil is the fifth market in sales. So not much of our money is from Brazil, but every money that comes from outside of Brazil, we don't have a tributation treat with United States. So we get another 30% cut in our sales. So we all already have like the fees for the government because everyone pay taxes, I think, and then we have this cut for the seller, like Steam and Google Play, and that's equal for everyone. But when we are living in Brazil, you lose another 30% of that because we have to pay taxes in the United States and in Brazil because we don't have this treaty between these countries. And so even if you already are in the industry, you have this, let's say, weight in your feet to keep going in the industry. But even before you get to that, as I come from this very countryside place, many of my teachers, like my biology teacher, my math teacher, my physics teacher, everyone in my school, they were from agriculture. They were like agricultural engineering. Like they know math, but they were not like high quality teacher for that area because no one that now I live 10 minutes walk from one of the major universities in Brazil. That's Unicamp. That's where I studied. But there, we have thousands of people being graduated every year, and no one of these quality of degree, they want to go to these external areas of the country. So it's very hard for us to get good teachers for the area that are very far from the coastline in Brazil, let's say. So I had the luck of my father being a programmer. So he taught me. But if I would be needing for the assistance of the teachers I had, I don't know if I would make. And many people don't have this luck I had. So it's very hard for these people that come from these places that don't have a good school, doesn't have a good library, where they are don't have good internet, because some places it's very like low speed and very fluctuating the signal of the internet. So they don't have the same access to knowledge and to groups to talk about that and to get bigger and to get into the industry.
Yeah, these are a lot of interesting points, especially because I know you're talking mostly from experience, from Brazil, but these are all very relative in a lot of ways. I mean, the taxes, that's a big deal, because I know everybody, at least everybody that I ever talked to, most and foremost, it's like, oh yeah, what's the key area you're targeting? It's the U.S., right? U.S.
Yeah.
English-speaking countries, and then whatever else that follows in line with whatever the game is, right? But then you have those other factors that a lot of times, some of us don't necessarily think about. I mean, there's obviously like, value-added taxes and things like that, but there's so many more layers that some of us might not be aware of, and those obviously create challenges in terms of like, hey, accounting for that. How do you be more resourceful? How can you be more sustainable as a studio, as creating commercial products and stuff, especially from some of these areas, specific countries and whatnot. And then,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to share a tale. It's a true tale that I was faced with. It's not from where I was born. It's from other region of Brazil that's very, very like more poor or more in the countryside. And there was a school for which we were creating games for the educational game, because we made games at first for educational for the public schools. And one of those schools, like we were creating games for them. And then when we went to the city, the school didn't have computers. So we talked with the governors and said, "Oh, you have to buy computers. Like you can't pay us to make games, and then they don't have a computer, they don't have internet." And then they bought, and then we went there again to visit, and there was no door on the room where the computers were. And we called like the director for the school and said, "Oh, why did you like remove the door and like put cement over it?" And she said, "No, because if I don't do that, someone will steal the computers." They never had contact with a computer in that city. But okay, like I know people who will like they may steal the computers, but if you like enclose that in a tomb, no one will use the computer. So why did you buy that?
It's so funny, and I think it really paints that like unique perspective that we don't think, like we're talking about it. It sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it's a different perspective, different mindset, especially too. And I think that is different, but definitely relates to what you're talking about with like in your area, where a lot of the focus is on agriculture. And basically, it's like depending on, different countries and spaces, there might be in their own little bubble because of like cultural beliefs. And it's not that they're bad, but it's also can be potentially limiting for like what we're talking about here in the games industry. And then, of course, as you mentioned too in your story, and it's another good example is just the resources. Yeah, sure, you have certain resources available on the web, but not everybody has that level of connectivity. Not everybody has computers, but that doesn't. And I know these sound like they're somewhat extreme, but having these understanding of what these challenges are and what else that can be done to kind of focus and help empower. It's still also be mindful of these things, because like you said, hey, the school wanted to make these games for this other school and stuff, but then next thing you know, you find out, well, okay, great, we made the games, but now they can't play them, and it's just really interesting and funny, and not so funny way, so really, really interesting things in terms of some challenges there. But I want to kind of go in a little bit more too, because we did talk about this, about how, being connected virtually is obviously probably the most effective means to grow the industry in these areas and such. Not just Brazil, but beyond, right? But even with this, though, what would you say that are also some of the challenges that devs and studio face if where they are doesn't necessarily have a known presence or even or are even recognized in the industry? So I think it goes into a kind of a bigger focus here. But what are some of those challenges about not having a presence or recognized in the industry?
One of the problems is the lack of understanding that you can create games, because I always try to be doing like talks and workshops all around where I am, because as the first time I was doing that, there was one student that was like very young, like 16 or something like that, and he was for a very poor place in the city. Already in the city I'm living in, because it's a city with a lot of knowledge, a lot of technology, but he is from a poor area. And the first day of my workshop, I would start explaining like how to use some game engine to create a game. I think we were using like Construct for that game. And the first day, like his eyes would like glow and said to me like, I will be creating a game. Like I can create a game. I said, yes, that's what I'm here for. Like we will be like 1 week creating one game for you, a very simple game, but we will be creating one game. And like something switched inside of this person that he never like really, like he played a lot of games, but for him it was another reality. So when like we gave him like the information that it's possible, like you can, so and then we have to gather people to spread this word that it's not from another word. We here, like in Brazil, in any area over here, we can create games, and this is one of the things that I think is most important, to have these local hubs, because then you have like a meetup every month, every like 2 months or something like that,
right?
That people can go, they can see people that create games, and then we start like spreading the word about that and go giving this agency, giving this power to the local people. And beyond that, there's another problem that I want you to solve with that kind of network, is we start very small, like everyone everywhere in the world, like, and we start struggling to create your first game, your first project, and then we start like hopefully you start getting better and greater, and sometimes you have a client. For me, like I was creating educational games, but I also had to make software to make like ends meet, and but at some point I said, why am I making software? Like I'm already like, I have a few people working with me, and like there is no reason whatsoever for me to be creating software. But I was disconnected. And there was like, I was already 10 years in this industry creating games, because it was like around 2013. And I discovered that I could help other people, but as I was like living in my bubble alone, I would just like get away from this client, do not take the job, but someone could be doing that job, and someone like could be like, I could be teaching these people to get this kind of jobs, and then doing the same thing I did. And some other problems I had to learn on my own. I had to struggle a lot to understand how to face that kind of problem. And like when we are together and we make some kind of meetups and this kind of connection that needs to be physical. Like we can have this kind of things virtually, but it's good once in a while to be physically like talking with people, shaking hands, and then exchanging these ideas to make everyone like grow faster, because everyone in the community, they will be learning new things. Everyone has their own problems. And when you share that problem with other people, you start like reducing the time he has to face this issue on when it's his turn. So creating this hub, it's very, very important for us to strengthen our community and get grow faster and better.
Yeah, you make some really interesting points there too. Because, well, backing up a moment, you called out again to more of the kind of like the aspect of the cultural bubble, if you will, that I think every country has, or city, or whatever the location may be. And it's so there's that element, right? Like you live in this bubble, and then you're thinking, okay, this is only what I believe. And I think the example you provided from your own experience too is really interesting, because it can relate to not just a location or cultural base, but it's also it can be what's the word I'm looking for? But it can be limiting, essentially. You're like, then you one day you started questioning yourself, like, why am I just doing this? I have all this expertise and experience and everything else, but I'm getting caught kind of in this this routine that's not necessarily where I want to be, or the kind of things I want to be doing and everything. So, but I think to really call out what was really important with what you shared is, then I question myself, why am I doing this? Is there a definitive reason? And then kind of like pivoting a little bit. And then also what you summarized at the end there was the aspect of we know there's so much available out there from virtually, right? But then I would have to agree with you, and I'm sure many do, there's that level of connection if it's done in a physical way that's a lot more tangible. There's a lot more that's probably ascertained and built from there. And like you said, it's a great way to strengthen community. But then it's always that challenge, of course, of getting people together in a unified way to meet locally and everything. But it's still one of those things that seem like more of that needs to happen, because where it can and have influencers in that space, I would say, like yourself, that because another example, you were showing that kid and things clicked and he started seeing that potential. Well, that could be a future employee possibly, or someone that's helping you with the project. And then that's allowing you to scale. And then if more people are doing these things and everything else, and more things are being done to scale, again, we're talking about improving the industry, even in these small little areas. And I know this is probably a big topic, well beyond the, like, we have time or even like, this could go on forever, but at least these are really great starting points, I think, to go further and find ways that how to empower others and also create that awareness, which is a great segue into the next section and areas I want to talk about. Because, as we outlined, there's lots of challenges that studios, developers, and just people face, when this industry, especially when they're trying to maintain a presence in the industry. And it goes all across the board, whether it's local, very micro, or global, on a macro level. But knowing this, what do you think are some ways that can help empower and create greater awareness for these segregated groups?
We this like network structure is very important, because here in Brazil for quite some time we had only one association, that's Abra Games, that's the national association, like ESA. So they were there, they were doing a lot of things, they were trying to get events, they were trying to get everyone to be better. However, with just one association, they only think about the place where the money is. Like they were always close to São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro over here. But all the other areas, desegregated areas, they don't represent too much in money. Like for you and in people as well. Because if you for you to have an idea, like the whole state where I was born, they have 1.5 million people, and like it's huge. Like it's I think like for you to cross the state I was born, you get about 10 hours drive. So it's like it's very great. So but 1.5 million. Like the city I live in has 1.5 million people.
Wow.
Like the state of São Paulo, like São Paulo city, the capital, they have 13 million people. And if I take the state of São Paulo and I remove São Paulo from there, we have still 20 million people. So for people thinking about public politics or the industry, it's natural for them to focus on this area that will help a lot of people, but you are leaving this other behind. So we are creating now a network. Like every state is creating a regional local association that take care of the whole state, and we are providing this network to help they grow. For like here São Paulo, I think Ceará and Rio Grande do Sul, there is a few states in Brazil that have been doing games for a long time, and they already have their own association that are very mature. And we are sharing everything we have, like the how do you create a new association, how do you get to talk with the people in your state about creating new laws, changing taxes. We are doing like all these guides and talking openly with all the states, so that everyone can not start from the scratch. And even like these other states, because they don't have so many people, it's more difficult for them to create a group with like 50 companies. So you can build pressure on the politics. You have probably at the beginning too little people, but with intelligence and some help from us, we can like kickstart these other states. So we are trying to do this kind of empowerment to get like, I personally, this is not like this network of intelligence that we do, but I personally, because I have all this my experience from growing up in a place that we don't have access to many things, and I do keep a hold with the universities over there, and I try to be present in all every year I try to see the projects that are leaving the university, because now they have a game course in my city. So I try to be there. Any company that I know that came from there, I try to help them grow at the beginning. Like I try to hire some internships from people over there, like to make they feel that, because there is no let's say that people go to the university and learn how to make games, and then he goes out to the market and they have nowhere to play to work. So I try to provide that connection as well. And it's good for us because to live in those places are so much cheaper. So the people over there, they get the opportunity to be working with games, and we, on the other hand, we can we'll have more. We have to give more workshops. We have to give a more be more close to these people than a person that comes to the market over here. But they will be cheaper for us to hire as well. So there is a balance.
You know, there's a lot of cool things that you mentioned here, and I mean, you led in with basically it's a network structure, and I think what's important in this too is it's not just one particular agency or organization or things like that, but it really comes down to that network being a means of having a good open line of communication with others. Sure, these organizations could be doing things differently or whatever, but at least they are providing a framework. So when there's others that are taking that initiative to start these things, that onboarding, that whole process of developing this foundation can be streamlined, could be scaled, and thus making that process happening faster. And then you led into, which is another key thing, where again, this is all over the place in terms of regulations or having certain countries better understand what this industry can do for them. And that's also understanding like the government, what are some of their goals and objectives? Because especially like, elected officials and things along those lines, what are they ultimately likely trying to do? And a big focus, I think, for no matter where you are in the world, is making sure, in most cases, do people have jobs? How can we stimulate the economy, right? And if you're providing this infrastructure that eventually can support and create jobs, then that's more likely to get on board with these people, with the government, and things along those lines. And you know what? I think it's interesting too, because we might think about this and look at our situation and continue to live in our bubble, but it also, as you clearly state, it's this whole network. It's this whole means of communication with each other and with other entities that are going to make it happen. And if thinking that you can do it by yourself, well, of course you couldn't. And it's not that anybody would be wrong in thinking that. It's just more the idea and concept that it could become very overwhelming, and then we do nothing. So yeah. It's again, and plus it goes back to some of the things before you're saying in terms of like, hey, asking those questions, what can be done? If you look at it too singularly, like in yourself, and like, oh, what can I do? It's not so much about you as an individual as much as it is how can others be leveraged in a positive way and beneficial and like almost symbiotic way, if you will, to obtain what we're all looking for. And there's just, I love, again, that you outlined it that way, because it provides some clarity behind this problem that can be really hard to think about. And it's not easy to solve, but at least you provided a nice, simple breakdown of what that process could look like, and moving forward with that. So I want to continue this then and saying, because I know, again, some of us might be listening thinking like, well, that's cool and everything. And yes, probably agree. But still a lot of this stuff can really come from, just being connected and having these other things and stuff. But I outside of just simply being more connected online, because we already identified that can be a problem too, and limiting. What would you say that are other kinds of resources or support or even information that could be beneficial to help create opportunities and growth for everyone in the industry? So I think a good starting point is kind of what we're talking about, so other people know in the industry, like, yeah, this is some of the stuff that goes on and why it might be challenging. But what do you think? And I'm looking at this from an external perspective, meaning like people who aren't aware of some of these issues and stuff. What do you think resources, support, information could be beneficial that can create opportunities and growth for everyone?
Well, I started my quest because at first I was just like trying to create games, and then that was just turn after 10 years being in the industry that I said, no, I have to think on the community. And that was when I get to the IGDA, and I think like IGDA is great on that. When I started, there was not so much material on how to create a chapter, how to organize a community. But on the recent years, they created a lot of material. They have a lot of documents that give some structure for you to start creating a community, how to get engagement, how to call people in, how try to get money funding for the actions. Because like you want to do a game jam, okay, but you need a place for the people. You need like some money, like to buy food for everyone or be close to a place. So that they have these materials that help you get to that. But I I should highlight that each country there is some individuality. I think that from outside, what I see is that the Electronic Software Association and the GDA are very strong in United States. So they do a lot of help directly for the community. Here in Brazil, that's not the case. Like, we have this association, we have a few chapters, but over here, the best place for you to go to look for help is the government. There is a lot of actors in the government that will help you, and some of them we are trying to recreate, because on 20 years ago, when I started to work on the gaming industry, there was the first government. It was from Lula da Silva, that's now our current president again. He was elected in 2002. And on 2003, I was starting on the industry. There was like nothing in Brazil. Like we have like dozens of studios. If you count everyone in the country, there was a dozen of studios. It was very small. But somehow I said, no, but we need some help, because at that time there was no Steam, there was no Google Play, there was nothing. And for us to distribute a game, it was very hard for us to get a game from Brazil to the world. It was like hell. It was very, very difficult. Very few companies managed to survive from that time. That's one of the reasons that I went to education, because there was an internal market. So I didn't have to go to that of getting a partner to publish our games. But at that time, I get to go to the presidency. I went to the Ministry of Technology. Like, there was an event in my school, and I stopped the guy from there. I said, no, we have to talk about games. And I convinced him to get me and a few other companies that was starting in Brazil. And from 2004 beyond, it was like the first funding for education. And Lula, he has this vision that has a lot of connection with this issue of the segregated people. And he had this vision called the pontos de cultura, like cultural points or something like that. They were not focusing mainly on the big guys from the culture. Like, they would give funding for movies and for like big books and big theaters. However, they had this action that was spread all over, especially on more segregated regions, giving like not much money, but enough for the guy to create a record, and for the people like to buy instruments to create a band. So it was a public policy to help like these people that are very marginalized to get like one foot in the industry.
Yeah.
And we are now trying to get that to games. So like, and here in Brazil, we have a lot of ways to get help from the government. We have like one institution that's called Sebrae, that they help any company, no matter like what you are working with, how to survive. Like, you are starting a company and said, oh, I don't know anything about how to create a company. Then you go to that institution, and the government, they will like get your hand and give you a lot of courses for like, oh, you have to do that, and then you have to think about that, and then you do that, and then we have to pay taxes this way for you not to be sued by the government. So these are very important for anyone in the industry, all this support from different actors.
You know, I'm glad you bring that up, because it gives me a different perspective too, being in the States, where I know that there are, and I've actually partake in some of these organizations that do help basically new businesses and independent business owners, or whatever the case may be, but new businesses starting up. There are a lot of organizations that do that, but still, I mean, even if some of these organizations or entities don't exist in some countries, there's still going to be some level. There should be, I would think, in most cases, not all, because every country is different. But where there's some level of support for entities like that, or look a little bit broadly. I think that's what you were calling out to before, where let's say, okay, they don't have a gaming industry sector or focus or anything like that, but they do have something focused on the technology sector, or just business as a whole, or anything. And even in my case, where I was obtaining some of these services, I received an advisor, a mentor, and while they didn't have experience in games industry, they were still able to share concepts and other key things, like you said, like taxes and other important core concepts that relate to business and building things up, where they can easily be applied to any industry. It's just a matter of maybe looking at things a little bit differently, but otherwise there's still a lot of those resources out there that we tend to think that might not be there. It's just a matter of how you're looking for them and how you're applying them in order to be applicable. And then again, that's just that kind of what it sounded like with you, that initial starting point to get to where you guys are now, and how you continue to grow. So it's just really good stuff that you shared that, because sometimes we just, again, stay in our own little bubble and be like, oh, there's no gaming industry stuff, therefore, and it's too much for me to do, therefore it might be really challenging. But it's like, no, there might be different ways to go to obtain or travel down that path, opposed to simply just saying it's not here, so therefore little I can do. So absolutely love that you shared that.
And it's important for us to remember that it's common for us to talk only about like games when we're talking about the gaming industry. But if you are trying to create a studio, it's important for you to get some understanding of these basic rules where you are living in. Because when I started creating games for Steam specifically, at some point I was served a bill of $2,000 of taxes that I didn't pay, because no one had told me that when I get money from abroad, I had specifically a way to declare that. It was not all the other things that I did before. And when I get the fine for not doing that properly, and for a small studio that's really in the start, that can be the end of them.
Yeah, exactly. So again, more of a reason than not to seek that help, especially when starting out. And you know what? I'll be honest. People that do that online, you're not really going to get the answers you need. It's very local specific. So all good stuff to think about. All right. Well, I know we're coming on time here. So before we go, first and foremost, I would love for you to share, 3 suggestions or tips that you would recommend to our listeners today about what we discussed.
Yeah. My first suggestion is create or help local hubs if there is. Try to avoid creating thousands of hubs in the same city. Try to talk to each other. The idea of creating a hub is for people to talk with each other. So reach out, try to find people in your region that are trying to create this network, help them, or create your own if there is none. Second, help people that are new in the industry. You never know how good these people will be, and you were in his situation, you needed help sometimes. So try to help these guys in game jams. Try to go to schools and do talks for people that are studying yet on schools or in high schools or universities. And third and foremost, connect to the associations, because it's important to know the local taxes, the local laws, the local everything, and to have people that you can relate in a more close close space. However, it's important for you to understand on the other level as well, how we can help, as a nation, everyone, and also internationally, how people from the outside can help you too. Because like on IGDA as well. Like when I started, like I always talk with Kate Edwards. She was the executive director when I was created my chapter in Brazil, and like she's amazing. I love Kate Edwards. She always helped me any way she can. And sometimes in Brazil, like you don't have some connection to someone. Like, for instance, let's say I'm creating an acceleration or incubator here in Brazil. Sometimes it's very hard, especially for hardware and electronics over here. It's very expensive for us. But you have some connection in the United States that they know people from Microsoft or Intel or any place. Sometimes they would like give you these for if you have like a public you have a space that you are encouraging people to get in this industry. Maybe you can like connect with people in the private sector, and they will match this investment from the public ones with the private and give you like computers and equipment. But you have to be connected. You have to have people that are in those places to know what you are doing and help you.
Yeah, but you have to make the initiative to make those connections too. You're not going to just know these people right off the bat. And sometimes I think it's like, well, I don't know that person. Well, find out who knows that person, or find out someone who may not know that person but knows of someone who does, and that just basic networking. So really, really great tips there, and especially. They seem obvious, but at the same time, I think it's because they're not, because you've applied them and shared them with a different approach, a different perspective. So all awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much for being here. Before we close, Marcelo, I would love for you to share how to get in touch with you, but also, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show in the shout out, if you stuck around, we're going to give you that info in terms of how to get those games. But first, Marcelo, what is a great way for people to learn more about Elix Games or connect with you? Social, what's the way we can go about doing that? Okay.
Well, you can like go to our website to know more about our games. It's ilix.games, ILAEX, and you can get me, especially on Twitter. Is the network I use the most. My handle over there is Arendhil, ARENDHIL. Also the same handle for Instagram, Facebook, but I use Twitter the most. Like you can find me there faster. And there is my email, marcelo@ilixgames.com.brazil.
Awesome. And for those keys, basically, again, Marcelo, thank you for offering this to our listeners. And for those who are listening and would like, we're going to make some posts once this episode goes live. And for the first, I wouldn't say first, I would say for anybody who engages with those posts, retweets them, shares them, anything along those lines, just any form of engagement, we'll select at random to provide you 10 keys. And the keys specifically are for 2 of Marcelo's games, which is Lux X Legacy. And we have some for Fight Your Inner Demons pack, which is Soul Gambler and Face It. So again, when this episode goes live, we make some social media posts. Please, as you know, I always love it when you share and find the content helpful for others. That's really our goal here. But also just a little extra incentive, thanks to Marcelo. If you also want to get a game out of helping others, then this is a great way to do it. And these are some fun titles I think you'll enjoy. So again, Marcelo, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights and also how we can go about creating more of these communities and facing these challenges that so many of us do face, regardless of where we're from. Some really good ideas here, and appreciate your time on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement.
I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.